Congratulations to eNCA, the South African media outlet that's been making a concerted effort to find one of the first 59 refugees to come to the United States from South Africa to conduct an interview. I know because they've been in touch with me since early on trying to see if I could convince any of the refugees to speak with them. Those I've been in touch with refused in no small measure because the actions of other media outlets, not the actions of eNCA, they didn't do anything to upset people to my knowledge, but other media outlets that have doxxed and harmed the interest and the lives and led to death threats against some of the refugees and their family members left behind in South Africa. So congratulations to eNCA and to Annika Larson for their interview with Errol Langton in Alabama. But there are a few problems with this interview. While it's very informative and there appears to be no political objective to running this story, there are some questionable things that need to be addressed in this interview and to set the record straight.
The United Nations defines a refugee as a person who has fled their country to escape conflict, violence or persecution and seeks safety in another country.
First off, it opens with commentary from someone in the studio who has fled their country. So what? That isn't germane here. The United Nations is not hosting the South African refugees. The United States is. And our definition of a refugee is governed by the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1980, not by the United Nations.
South Africa is divided over whether a group of Afrikaners who recently left South Africa for the US qualify as refugees.
Well, South Africans can be as divided and uninformed of U.S. law as they wish. This is an internal, sovereign U.S. issue under our law, not South African law. So you can debate and complain about all you want. You don't know what refugee status is, and it isn't germane to you.
Days after US President Trump was sworn in, he signed an executive order suspending asylum seekers and refugees.
Now that's simply false. President Trump suspended the refugee admission program for 90 days with an executive order on the 20th of January. He did not sign anything about asylum. Legal entrance into the United States can still apply for asylum. Any claim to the contrary is simply false. For instance, Annika Larson came here legitimately. If she fears persecution, she can apply for asylum while she's here in the United States. Unlikely to get it, but she can apply for it. President Trump did not do anything to the asylum program. That's simply factually untrue. And it shows how the media don't understand the distinction between a refugee status and asylum.
But Trump made one exception. He invited Afrikaner farmers.
Invited Afrikaner farmers? Folks, this is a disingenuous statement. On the 7th of February, nearly 3 weeks after President Trump suspended the refugee program, he opened a refugee program for Afrikaners suffering unjust racial discrimination. Not for farmers. Afrikaners suffering unjust racial discrimination. And the media who chose to ignore that got it wrong and are still getting it wrong. While Trump later made a public comment after Ramaphosa had insulted him at the State of the Nation address, he made a comment that he would fast-track Afrikaner farmers for citizenship. Trump has no such authority, and that was never the case. The program never was exclusively for farmers, nor was it for white South Africans.
We're here in Birmingham, Alabama, which was one of the most segregated states in the U.S.
Well, that's just ugly and gratuitous. Should I preface the interviews that I do in South Africa with the following ludicrous statements? We're here in Bulawayo, the seat of notorious mass murderer Shaka Zulu. Or, we're here in Cape Town, the heart of the most brutal racist regime in all of Africa. What a ludicrous description of Alabama. And that's just a cheap shot. Alabama is far more than how she described it.
Do you feel you got prioritized over people who are applying for refugee status to come to the United States who are in actual war zones, living in refugee camps with absolutely nothing?
Now my question here is, how does his opinion of U.S. government priorities matter? It's his view. It's not the U.S. government. Also, Annika tugs at the heartstrings. Either that, it's an intentional effort to influence the viewer, or she demonstrates that she does not understand refugee law in the United States.
Do you think this is an offer that should be extended to everybody, regardless of their color?
Well, here's a newsflash. It is extended to everybody around the world, regardless of their skin color. Color does not play a role in the Immigration and Nationality Act, and it never has. The overwhelming majority of the 3.1 million refugees who've resettled in the United States since 1980 are not white. Why the obsession with race and with misleading viewers? Even Donald Trump brought hundreds of thousands of so-called people of color from Yemen, from Somalia, from Chad, from Sudan, from China into this country during his first term. The fact that he suspended a program which the media never mentioned and eNCA fails to mention was wildly corrupt and violated U.S. law by the Biden regime. The fact that they don't mention that is so disingenuous. That's why the program was suspended. And the program brings in mostly people of color. It is strange how the media, and also how eNCA, doesn't mention that Biden brought in 300,000 white Ukrainians to the United States. That was perfectly fine, but 59 white South Africans apparently breaks the bank here. Apparently that's beyond the pale.
Do you think you 59 people who've come over have become political pawns in a political game?
Now, of course they're political pawns. Her questions alone make him a political pawn in this conversation. The media in South Africa's politicians have made the 59 refugees pawns. Just look at how they describe them on the screen here, with quotation marks around refugee, as if it's not legitimate. That's disingenuous and dishonest by eNCA. They are refugees. They've been granted refugee status. The fact that you don't like it, you don't agree with it, doesn't change the legal standing. They are still refugees in America and protected under our Constitution. So get rid of your quotes and stop misleading your viewers. There's no question they're legitimate refugees, and stop the nonsense, eNCA. Now, after these comments, you're probably going to think that, oh, you must have a big beef with Annika Larson, or you think that this was a hit job. Not at all. I think this is a pretty good interview and a pretty fair interview. And I think that that Mr. Langton got his chance to say what he wanted, which he would have had here should he chose to do it, but he wasn't interested. He didn't contact me. So it's great that eNCA has done this, and I'm sure this cost them a lot of money. They stayed here for a long time to get this one interview, and congratulations to them. And it's a pretty fair interview. However, it wasn't devoid of problems. As I mentioned, there's some very misleading things in this news story. Whether it was intentional or not, I can't say. But certainly, either people don't understand the law, don't understand the situation, or they simply choose to ignore it. I'm not an immigration lawyer. I don't work for consular services, the United States Embassy. I don't work for PRM. But I am capable of reading the law and applying my experience both as a member of the U.S. government, someone who's worked in embassies and dealt with refugees, and also as an independent journalist, and tell you the truth instead of misleading you, unintentionally or otherwise. What say you, refugees? What say you, South Africa? Hey, folks in America, what do you say?